Hey there. Good morning for me. Whatever time you're watching this, good morning to you. So I am, if everything goes well, recording a practice of my panel for Anime Boston this weekend because if you're not Robbie or Seamus, you're probably not going to see it unless you're one of the con goers that I don't know. Um, I tried recording this yesterday. I'm using Zoom because I don't actually have a screen recorder right now. And I did something wrong and the files didn't come through. So I really don't quite know what to do to salvage those. If I can, maybe I can. But we're just going to try again because I need to practice anyhow. And I'm a little bit less enthusiastic this time because I've done this before. But still, thank you all for watching this. And a lot of people have encouraged me, even though this is kind of silly of a topic. It's my first panel ever and the first con I've worked ever. And generally, it's been a long time since any of this fan stuff has happened. So it's an exciting time, and I'm glad to have something put together to share with people in these trying and trying and trying again times in 2022. That's not the tone for today because we're talking about copy abilities. All right. Buckle in. I am going to actually time myself today. I want to get it around 50 minutes. I think I went over last time. So here's your crash course in Kirby's copy abilities, a degree, a certificate earning program in Kirby's action game specialty copy abilities. Now, I think the first time you turn off the highway and discover that there are people who talk about Kirby online, it's usually kind of surprising that there's anything to talk about at all because it's a very simplistic game. It's cute and it's childish and it's very simple like that. And you'd be surprised that the first thing people like to talk about is its lore. And usually in doing that, the kind of horrific contrast between the cute tone of the game normally and the really ghastly eldritch horror kind of vibe that they bring in for the end of each game and for the backstory of each game. And while that's fun, and I'm sure that has been the topic of many a panel, what I like to talk about and my favorite connection to the game is the copy abilities, because those are iconic for sure. And I am a huge fan of 2D action games, and Kirby is one of my absolute favorite series. So this is where I connect the most strongly. If we put aside the amazing music, the memorable environments, the cute characters, the endless spin-offs of incredibly different kinds of fun, different ways to play Kirby, and the laundry list of other reasons to like Kirby, my favorite is definitely copy abilities. So I'm presenting a yet pure unedited take, which is that there are three styles you can break copy abilities down. Now, I'm not going to talk about spin-off games because they do sometimes do their own spin on copy abilities, but they're just different enough from the main game to make it not exactly worth talking about here. I just think that'd be a little bit too much of a diversion, and you don't really have that same emerging pattern that way. So first, I'm going to introduce, without context, the three styles. No matter how many Kirby games you've played something that's either The Forgotten Land, which just came out, or one of these. So you should be able to identify what you already enjoy or what ones seem totally unfamiliar. Adventure style is the most simplistic, and it's named after the game in which they were invented. So they are the most simplistic. They are usually just one move. You press the attack button and you do one thing. Like burning here is literally just you do burning. You move forward and you turn into a fireball. There's no other fire moves involved in burning in, well, adventure style. Burning is just burning. That is all there is to it. So adventure style is the first, and it is the most simplistic. Mixed style is not simplistic at all. It is also very one note in that each ability does one thing, but where it shines is the creativity. The idea with the mixed games is that you're taking two different things and putting them together. And in most of the games that are fully mixed, you're actually mixing a copy ability from a very small pool with an animal friend, which is something that has not come back. It's something that they like to reference, but this is a topic that might be new to a lot of people, is that there were two games in which Kirby could hop on the backs of friends, like Kind the Sunfish here. And if he had an ability, they would mix. So you'd have Spark Kirby on his own, but then if you hop onto Kind's into Kind's belly, you'd get Spark Kind, which would turn into a light bulb move. If you teamed up with Ku the Owl, you would fly and you would drop thunderbolts on people. So even though they were also simplistic in terms of they only have one attack, the way Adventure is, they're way more creative. And the game has a lot more different abilities because they are, they're you multiply fish times the amount of fishes you can cook a different way with abilities, and you got a bunch of different moves. Then there's a deviation in Kirby 64 on the right here, where you're not mixing Kirby with a friend, you're just mixing abilities. So fire and needle creates something about fire and needles. This one here is needle and needle, and you don't mix 8 things usually, but in this case, the idea is you've got so many needles that there's just countless pointy things coming out of Kirby, sticking out into all different directions. And I thought that Forgotten Land would be the only game in recent memory for people. And then they dropped 64 crystal shards just a couple weeks ago at NSO. So I am stoked to be able to have that as like an actually relevant talking point for mix abilities. That's one of the best ones. Then we have modern style, which is the most prominent. It is the most complicated also. They pretty much gave full-on fighting game move sets to each and every ability. You got not just one move, but standing moves, running moves, air running moves. You've got all different kinds of inputs, not to mention shielding, blocking, there's like command grabs and stuff. Modern is most different from the other ones in that it's fully fleshed move sets, where Adventure and Mix are pretty much doing one thing. Modern is you got one ability that is an entire move set. You've got so many moves to pick from, and that is definitely its most defining trait. That's kind of a quick intro to the 3, and we're going to take a lot more time applying them to the different games. Damn, I definitely should not rush that in 5 minutes in the actual presentation. We're going to spend the brunt of our time looking at the history of Kirby now, and all the different abilities and how these 3 different styles changed over time when they were made, how they transitioned and faded in and out of the series, because oh my god, it is not simple. It is not linear. It is not a simple series of one replacing another as time goes on. It is so back and forth and so complicated and involves different people. And I have to go grab my water before I start this. All right. History time, baby. As we go, I'm going to talk about like kind of a souvenir copy ability for each era so that you can remember it and I can kind of explain what I'm saying about what made the game unique. And a lot of these are going to be my own favorites. It won't always be that, but if there's nothing of like historical significance in the game, I'll probably just use an example that I love so you can slowly get a sense of my tastes. And I'd encourage you to think about your own and reflect and be like, man, I love Bomb and Kirby 64 or something like that. So to start it off, we have to talk about Masahiro Sakurai, who is very famous now because he created Smash. He was just super celebrity status for the last decade or so because of the most recent Smash games. He's become a really big part of the image of Super Smash Brothers. And in those discussions, people are always saying like, oh, I bet you didn't know like he invented Kirby or like he works on Kirby. And to clarify, he does not still work on Kirby. He only created 3 mainline games. He did a spinoff afterwards, and it's great, but it's not really what we're talking about here. That said, to talk about the different kinds of abilities, you really have to look at the Sakurai Trio because they're not exactly the first 3 games, but each time he picked up Kirby, he had this desire to just completely reinvent the wheel. He's quoted as saying that he didn't really want to make iterative sequels over and over for the rest of his life. So each time he worked on Kirby, he just totally changed the whole thing and then just left that inspiration there for the company that does work on Kirby, HAL, to make what they can of his innovation. Each one of these games changed stuff so much. So first off, the first Kirby game did not have copy abilities. I called those abilities the adventure abilities because Adventure, the second game, is where they got invented. Dreamland 1, or just Kirby, basically in Japanese is what it's called, didn't have copy abilities. It was all about inhaling and spitting out star bullets. And because of that, in order to make the gameplay a bit more varied with power-ups, they had items that you could pick up. And I never really knew where the spicy curry in Smash came from. I didn't know what series it was from. The reason that it's been sticking around is because it was one of these abilities. It's a curry that you eat and you spit out fire. And it's not a kind of fire that we've seen again in the series. Similarly, there's the breath mint that's being displayed on the right, where you just kind of fly around and get tons and tons of air puffs, which you already have air puffs, so it's not exactly a new thing. It's not exactly adding anything different to the game, but they're fun. They're fun. It's a very simplistic and fun game. It's one of my top like 7 Kirby's, and the only way to mix it up is with these items. There's no copy abilities. However, one of the items is Mike, and Mike works just about the same way it always does. So if you want to argue, you could say that Mike is the oldest copy ability because it's pretty much still the same way that it has been since the first game. And it's iconic. We love Mike. Don't worry, we do get to having copy abilities eventually. In Adventure, like pretty much every copy ability that is iconic and has been in every single game and was kept during the snap that reduced the amount of copy abilities in Kirby Forgotten Land down by like half. All of the classic ones started off here. Sword, fire, ice, beam, wheel, rock, hammer, parasol. There's so many classic ones that started here. And this was their most simplistic form. As I said, this is adventure style, so they can only do one thing. And what's really novel about that is that they're so simplistic that there's 2 ices and there's 2 throwing moves and there's 2 fire moves. They were so one note that they couldn't even put 2 ice moves into the same ability. If you want to blow ice, you have to eat Pengi and you have to blow ice that way. If you want to use the ice cloud freezing ability, you have to fight a separate enemy entirely with Mr. Frosty, and they register as different abilities, ice and freeze. That's why fire and burning are separate in the games like Amazing Mirror, which we'll talk about later. But there's a really strange feeling when you go back and you've played all these Kirby games where obviously both of these moves would just be called ice in a normal game. And then you play this older game and it's like, you play it like 5 times and then you notice, hey, wait a second, only sometimes Kirby has the Sans hoodie on. Sometimes he's blue. What's going on here? And that's when you realize that Adventure literally had duplicate abilities. They're honestly really fun, and I like both of these. Adventure, there's a great, oh man, there's a great remaster of it on the 3DS eShop, which is closing as of like 4 days ago. So that's a terrible plug. But there's a really good remaster that removes the lag, and that makes it more fun. I love Adventure. It's like top 9 Kirby's, probably like my 9th favorite. It had like one summer at my top because despite being the first one, it is still really fun. And I think the strength of the Adventure style is that they kind of have to make those moves, those one-note moves, really fun when you're playing. So they're not all fun. Spark makes the game lag, so I don't like that very much, but Sword's fun. Ice, freeze, they're fun. Laser is super simplistic and niche, but in such a simple game, it's fun. It's one of the only moves that's not kind of awkward to use. So I'm not going to say that Adventure, especially in its original state, is a perfect game or that every ability is equally fun, but the creativity is there, and some of them are legitimately fun to use. You can't go wrong with Hammer. Hammer was good even when it debuted. So, as I mentioned, Masahiro Sakurai, as pictured, never really wanted to do the same thing twice with Kirby. So when he came back for his 3rd game, there was a lot of, I think, redirected energy. He famously said, as we all know, in the mid 90s, he said, I want to make a fighting game. And boy, did he make a fighting game. He made one of the most beloved fighting games of all time with a fleshed out roster like nothing that has only grown through 4 iterative sequels leading up to its most recent release in 2018, a massive larger than life crossover event with unbelievable cameos, characters from all over coming in to celebrate just this amazing game with its awesome fleshed out roster. And that game that he made was Superstar. It was Kirby Superstar. This is such a fighting game. As I mentioned, I could have pretty much called the modern abilities the Superstar abilities. This is where modern happened. He just beefed up every moveset so much. Beam was just a beam. It was just the whip. You press B, I almost said one, which shows how much I've been playing Return to Dreamland on my Wiimote sidewards. You press the attack button and you do a whip. No, now with the modern style in Superstar, whip beam has neutral, a grab move, a dash move, an air dash move, and a charge move. Generally, a lot of cool stuff, and there's just so much complexity. This is where now pretty iconic abilities like Fighter and Bomb came in because they were just like that much stranger. Bomb's simplistic enough that it actually is more or less the same no matter what style you put it into. And I think it's done its usual angled throws in all three formats without changing at all. So there are holes in my way of looking at this. But fighting has like light and heavy inputs and directional moves and combos and so much. Ninja's wild. It's got throwing stars. It's got like a little sword in the air. In different games, it has like charge moves. You can turn invisible. Everything just blew up. And also the number of abilities just skyrocketed in Superstar. This is one of the most beloved Kirby games. It's probably the most beloved Kirby game. And I love going back to play it because I did not think coming back to Kirby as an adult, I would be finding dash aerial attacks, but oh my God, it is so fun to use dash aerial attacks. To explain, I love moves when you can head into the air and just kind of beat stuff up and keep going, kind of like parkour, like you run, you jump, you land, you don't lose that momentum. And dashing air attacks are perfect for that. It's a little hard to get a picture, but the beam dash air attack, if you've played this game 30 times and never found it, I wouldn't blame you. You do a downward angled cone shooting out beams, and you can move really fluidly. So in a boss fight, you can push this out, put out this awesome angled beam, and then move backwards for that like safe spacing. Again, it's so, the action is so fluid that it almost feels like a fighting game. I also love ice a lot in this. You're going to hear me say that a lot during this presentation. Ice similarly has a dash air attack. Maybe it's just an air attack, but it has this sprinkle move where you spin in the air and do ice, and you can move. You have so much freedom. Oh my God, you can just destroy Wispy Woods with it. This is really the addition of aerial attacks, charge attack, all this stuff just makes the action so much fun. And I don't think it's fair to just say that modern abilities are the best because they have the most options, but by God, they're usually so polished that there's no way to go wrong. And you can usually find, if you dig through that fighting game style list of moves to pick from and look at all the different inputs, you can probably find an ability you or a move you love using in each ability and just generally go to town. But I think having this dropped all at once with not only fleshing out almost every single ability from Adventure, but also inventing like 8 of them that are pretty classic in their own way. I think it was just such a shock that Hal was like, oh, okay, great. That's very inspired. We'll get back to that later. We'll incorporate that another time. Let's just not think about that for now. Let's bring it back to something a little more simple. And then we got the Dark Matter trilogy. I think it is so wrong to classify this as a step down from Superstar, but if we are looking at it from the angle of copy abilities, you just can't deny how much got cut. I love these games. I'm going to be very clear here. This is coming really strongly from an angle of action alone, which is definitely my least favorite part of every one of these games. They're just bursting at the seams with creativity. And what we can do is indulge in how creative the copy abilities are, because, oh, they're the most creative. These are the most creative games in the whole series. They have these awesome art styles. Dreamland 3 has like the coolest art style in Kirby. It is just so high concept. They just commit so hard to the visuals. But I will say these games can be stiff as heck. And here's where we get into some unfavorable comparisons with the modern games, especially this little caveat. So what I said was kind of that this was Hal retreating from the complexity, but that's not really fair because this mix format does predate Superstar. Dreamland 2, 5th favorite Kirby game. Man, I got to get these rankings down before I make all these little notes about them. This actually was the follow-up to Adventure. This is less of a retreat to the simplicity of Adventure and more of a divergent. Actually, it's really fair to think about all of the Dark Matter trilogy as a fork in the road in a way that the series could have gone after Adventure. I think Sakurai took it his way, funneling his Super Smash Brothers making energy, quite honestly. And Hal took it another way. What I don't think is quite so fair is not incorporating much of the interesting stuff from Superstar after Superstar was made, but just not thinking about that yet. This is the purest form of the mix abilities. This is Dreamland 2. You've got three friends. You've got Kind the Sunfish, Coo the Owl, and Rick the Hamster. And this is an example of Rick with some mixing. This is mix. So Rick is shooting out needles from his back, or maybe they're bones, or man, I don't know what's going on there. But then in the other one, he just takes out a parasol and Kirby goes ball mode and goes up there. He goes up there. Kirby's usually a ball when he's with Rick. I think Rick pushes him on the ground. No, that might be a cat from a different game. Anyhow, I don't have a lot of standout favorite abilities from this. I love Dreamland 2. I play it to death, but you know, people go crazy for, I think it's Parasol Coup is when you make the owl into a tornado that you can control all around the screen. And that's awesome. Coup also can just do a lot of cool stuff where he can shoot like a triple feather cutter if you do cutter coup. It's a lot of fun. They're really fun here and there, but it's really about the creativity and the sort of like, wow, it's so funny that Rick is shooting spines out of his back. Many spines. He's spiny. Yeah, they're very one note, as I said, just like with Adventure. You get this cool idea, and then you just have one move to do with it, which isn't that bad because, again, you can switch up copy abilities whenever you want, and there's some fun puzzles with them and some infuriating ones, but it's a creative wonderland. And this is a creative super wonderland. Dreamland 3 is the prettiest, coolest, funnest game, and I can say the least about it by far. I have to give you a rain check. This is the only game I really haven't clicked with on a personal level. I kind of played it through. I've seen a lot of it, but I just think it'd be really unfair for me to tell you what's fun and what's not fun with Dreamland 3. All I know is like, yeah, it's a little bit stiff. It's pretty much the same thing as Dreamland 2 in a lot of ways, except you've got more animal friends, which is never a bad thing, especially from the character fun department. It's super fun. What's less fun is that you go from having every ability in Superstar to this is the next game. They cut it down to like 8. There's like, I'd probably fail to think of them now. They invented one. They invented sweeping, which is cute. And sweeping Choo Choo, who is pictured here, lets you fly on a broomstick, which is great fun. And yeah, it's an adorable game, but I think I would be kind of risking diminishing it to just that if I were to try and point out what's fun about it. So I'll just say it's notable because it came after Superstar and it was them firmly saying like, no, I mean, heck, it may have been developed at the same time as Superstar. I don't know a lot about these development cycles, but it really feels like them saying like, nope, we're just going to do our thing. Don't you even worry about it, Sakurai. We got this. We got mixed abilities. They're fun. And you have to give them credit because boy, did mix abilities become fun before they went out. Kirby 64, some of you may have just played for the first time or maybe tapped into some nostalgic sweet spot when it got re-released on the very predatory subscription service that the Switch is offering, which we're not talking about today. Either way, it's been made available behind a paywall, 2 paywalls. It's been made available again recently, which is fun. It's the anniversary. It's Ribbon and Adeline got plushes. You can't go wrong. This is a game I didn't play until 5 months ago. It's my 4th favorite Kirby game. It's so cool. It's just, I think whether or not it has a good art style is subjective because it's, they went so hard. They went so hard on making everything so expressive with these little googly eyes. Everything just has these little dotted eyes. And yeah, that's not mind blowing. It's not even as pretty and detailed as Dreamland 3 was right before it, but it is so charming. It is like my favorite low poly game. As much as I felt like I couldn't connect with Dreamland 3 and say much about it, I've only played this game once, and I feel like I can at least start the discussion of what's good about it. As I mentioned, this isn't mixing with animal friends. This is the final blur. It's all abilities all the time. You gotta mix abilities with abilities. So fireworks here rocks. It's bomb and fire, and it's so inventive. So fireworks mixability, that's fun. It's one note, but it's so much fun. You can use it in the air, or maybe it launches you into the air, and it covers a huge radius. So as I mentioned before, I love that parkour, like running and jumping and doing stuff without stopping. You can just run and jump and press one and poof, it makes this nice firecracker sound and just generally does a lot of damage to people. And it's so inventive. And I'd love to see fireworks come back in one way or another. They love referencing these abilities in more recent games, but boy, they have not touched them with a 10-yard pole in terms of actually bringing them back. Shuriken, I'm going to expose myself here. It's one of my favorite abilities, but I forget how to make it. It's like probably bomb cutter. That's my first guess. Maybe fire cutter. It's got to be bomb cutter. I think it's bomb cutter. It's like, I don't even think it animates you throwing the shuriken. It's like a scanning thing. I'm pretty sure you press the attack button, which is 1 if you're playing it on Wii like I do, and it just like instant sends that shuriken at the dude in front of you and it blows up. It's exploding shurikens that are like instant and they go like well Naruto, like they stick them, and it is such fun action. So again, it's one note, it's just one move, but it's so creative and it's so fun to execute. But this is not like a cute, pretty, awkward little game where there's like neat ideas, but they're not fun to use. Check this stuff out. Let me tell you the story of Darth Macross, the Wise, the sick as hell generally. These are fire and electric swords. These are so cool. I don't think I ever heard about them until I played this, and I hope they're memeing up online right now as people discover them for the first time. Fire Sword is this heavy great sword that Kirby drags behind him. He does a big long swing like a Dark Souls move or something when you use it, and it just hits everybody, and it's so awesome and weird, and it's just so creative. It's just such an iconic, they've done mix abilities in the future, and we'll talk about that. They've done like light mix abilities where a sword is usually involved, but this is just a totally different thing from the sword ability. Sword is almost never in the Dreamland or the Dark Matter trilogy games. I guess this is why when they bring it back, they bring it back. But this is the fun one, the dual wielding Darth Maul one, which I found out recently is actually a much more clear reference to some old mecha anime. Like it's either Macross or Gundam or something. I'm just going to pretend it's from Evangelion and that the sword represents like the will to live in the face of adversity or something. I don't really know. But I call it the Darth Maul stick, and probably everybody I know does too. And it's so fun. It's just as fun as it looks. He does this big twirling move and slashes in front of him and like a little bit behind him. And for such a simple, clunky game, so much fun. And there's probably so many mixed abilities I don't know about, but to have 4 that I can tell you are just so creative and so fun, I think this far and away the highlight of the mixing games. But who needs creativity? I just don't know why we would want to make something original. I'm about to put myself in hot water with Kirby Twitter, because me and every other early 20s person posting online right now grew up with these games. These are called the Flagship games, most of them. Amazing Mirror and Squeak Squad were made by, I think, a different company. They're one of the only ones, besides like spin-offs, so Epic Yarn's like quasi-spin-off. It's one of the only ones I'm talking about here that wasn't just made by HAL. It was kind of handled by another company. And there's a couple cute enemies that appear in both games that don't appear anywhere else, where I grew up with these and didn't realize they were so unique at the time. But then I came back and I'm like, yeah, these kind of are their own thing. But while they are definitely handled by another company, they really are not that original if we're looking at them in terms of copy abilities. And there might have been some kind of handheld limitation of the time, because what happened here is one of 2 events in which, as I said, the progression through systems isn't simple. It's not like we had Adventure and then we invented Mix to work on, I don't know, Game Boy hardware or something. And then Sakurai invented Modern. And then as soon as we could, we moved on from Mix to Modern. No, this is a total detour because for some reason, well, probably because they remade Adventure. This in the background here, Nightmare in Dreamland, is a pretty faithful, a pretty direct remake of Adventure. And for that reason, it is right down to ice and freeze and fire and burning being split. In terms of copy abilities, like the same thing. It rocks. Like it's fun. I love Adventure, and this is just I think it's less pretty personally, but it's a more smooth way to play the game, which is pretty awesome. No shade at Nightmare in Dreamland. It's pretty neat. But here's where I get into hot water, because people will make video essay after video essay hyping up Amazing Mirror for its so progressive, non-linear Metroidvania exploration style with, oh, just the best puzzles ever. As someone who actually plays Metroidvania games, this just is, it just falls into this childhood blank spot where, yeah, I've been a fan of these games for like 22 years at this point, and I love them so much. But having played them this much, I just get more and more bored of Amazing Mirror. Like, trust me, it is my most nostalgic Kirby game. But besides objectively speaking, it's a great game. I just don't know that much to say about it. It's just, I don't know. But Squeak Squad, which gets overhated for its simplistic story, and to be fair, some people say it has bad level design, which, like, I don't have a great read on whether or not it does. But people get so mad about this story when it is just as simplistic as Dreamland 2. And people love Dreamland 2 because Dark Matter Swordsman is just so hot. And, like, yeah, but, like, if we're comparing him head on to Possessed Darrow, it's marginal. And this story is just as simplistic as, like, so many Kirby games. It's just, like, I think I'm doing it a disservice, the series as a whole, by saying that games are always as, like, lore dry and plot barren as this, but cut it some slack. I mean, so many games dip into this category of, like, kind of a weak story. Why are we even getting mad about this? I'll tell you why to get excited about it, but that's after we actually talk about Amazing Mirror. I had a picture of Cupid on the last slide because these games have Cupid, and that's one thing that makes them iconic. Squeak Squad made Cupid a lot more fun than Amazing Mirror originally started it as, with those limp arrows. But yeah, overhyped Mirror. I don't have a lot to say about the abilities because they are really adventure style. Like, they even have fire and burning separate, which is better from a puzzle perspective in this game. But like, it's just so much like Nightmare in Dreamland. And yeah, it's got its different setup and they did their best to make it fresh, but I'm just going to use it as an opportunity to talk about some more fun stuff about the adventure games I haven't, like UFO. That's one of the best hidden moves where it's, like, not that easy to find at all. When you get it, you just know you're playing with something special. You can fly around and use a bunch of different beam moves, and it's one of my most anticipated ones to come back. Probably a lot of people right now. It's just super fun, and it appears in a lot of these games, like Adventure started it, which does make it an old classic. Similarly, Missile is something unique to this. It popped up in a spinoff, but you press one, you turn into a missile, and you shoot yourself at people. I think it's pretty fun. And then this is a good time to talk about super end game abilities, because I didn't talk about the Star Rod with Adventure, and that really pushed the Adventure format somewhere else. With, like, you can shoot a star in front of you. Pretty damn sure you can. Yeah, you totally can. And you can swing it as, like, a sword while you're doing that. And you can also jump in the air, which causes this wicked fast spinning move, which is, you know, the only one of my favorite parts of the simpler adventure games is whatever aerial moves they do have. And yeah, they really pack a lot of fun into these end game moves in the adventure like games, the adventure style copy ability games. And in this one, you get to use Meta Knight's sword, Galaxia. They call it the Master Sword, which is interesting, but I'm pretty sure it's Galaxia, although it does look different. But it looks like probably what he would have been holding. I know he threw it into the portal, so yeah, you get to use Master Sword, Meta Knight's Master Sword, and it's really fun, so that's great. But I have way more to say about Squeak Squad and this weird, like, physics stuff that it has going on that I found. First off, what it actually brings to the copyability game is mostly just reversions. This is the last stand. This is the last time they tried to make Kirby fun, like the traditional copyability is fun in 2D, without just straight up using the modern style. And in this game, you can unlock scrolls that give you more moves for your abilities, which is mad fun, by the way. But almost all of them are either like things that would become standard once we went back to modern, or just one step closer to having their modern movesets back, which is so funny. And the other notable gimmick that Squeak Squad tries to have is there's this really light mixing thing where you can take elements, ice, fire, and electric, and mix them with sword and bomb, which is fun. It doesn't fundamentally change how they work, but it lets you solve different puzzles, and it looks so cool. And by the way, like, it would have been easy to just use sword, but bomb, that was kind of a stroke of genius. Ice bombs and shock bombs and fire bombs, it's just cool. And I mean, those abilities are fun to use anyhow in the game. So these are some of the cooler abilities in the whole series, I would say. Maybe Squeak Squad is when the adventure style hit its peak from a purely copy ability perspective. I don't know. One thing that absolutely did peak out here was Spark. I have only mentioned Spark in terms of the fact that it lags your game in the NES adventure. It's literally just a defensive shield. And if you can tell, I don't really care much for that. Like, I like Needle, I like Freeze, I like Spark. I don't use them a lot because you're stationary. You press the attack button and you put up like a defensive barrier, and like, it's not exactly the game for that. But if you like it, you like it. You want to know why I like it here? Is if you run and you jump in the air, as I like to do, you use this, you have no air traction. You have so little air traction, which means that if you're running and jumping in the air, the spark does not stop you. It does not stop you and make you stationary and make you fall to the ground. You keep flying, but now you're flying through the air with an electric field. So this becomes an offensive move. So you can run through levels, parkouring, jumping into clouds of enemies, sparking them all, hitting the ground, and just keep running. I have played entire runs of Squeak Squad using this. It's not perfect. It's pretty much a physics exploit, but by God, if it's not the best showing for the OG Spark, where it's just one move adventure style. And similarly, Fighter is here now, which again makes this a really transitional title back to modern, because Fighter is far from simple in any implementation. And it does make the adventure style my most like contestable of the three styles. It's hard to limit yourself to one move. But Fighter and Ninja in this game have dive kicks, which is like Sheik, Zero Suit Samus, and Greninja and Smash. If you ever shoot yourself down to the stage like ASAP from the air, that's a dive kick. It sends you from the air to the ground as fast as possible with an attacking move. And you slide a little bit. You can keep your momentum going in this game if you do a dive kick. And that means you just have this little bit of a window where you can, kick through some enemies and then slide at another enemy with Fighter. And while you're moving, start a moving punch and kick barrage, which then in itself kind of keeps you moving. It's not crazy, but it's one of those things that I found in the game that made me so happy. So like diving from on high with Ninja, dive kicking at the ground is already so fun. And then you slide towards a guy while charging your super ninja move, sliding at him while charging a super ninja attack explosion move. That's sick as hell. So yeah, I just wanted to say that in front of an audience because this game gets overhated. It just gets overhated. It's not great. Objectively speaking, it's really mid, but I really like these two physics exploits and I had to talk about them. So as I said, we were already pretty much getting back to the modern style and definitely hitting the end of the rope in terms of innovating after that remake set us back 8 years or whatever. And a pretty beloved remake happened of a pretty beloved game. And they pretty much said, Sakurai, you were right 10 years ago. Do you have the notes in the office anywhere for how to make superstar abilities? We moved to modern forever. We haven't moved back yet. And my only question is if we ever will, or if things are going to change again. In the first game to set us on what I call the modern set of games, just the ones that came out in the last 10 years, because God, it's hard to think of a name otherwise. Return to Dreamland, the very first one, brought everybody back. Like everything either everything was already in here. You can't really fault the flagship games for the diversity of abilities, I'll say that. But everybody got given a full-on modern style moveset. So fire and ice, get back together. Squeak Squad already did that. But, get your moves back together. Freeze, ice, get back together. We're going to give you more moves, possibly in some cases, in some games here. And you're definitely just going to have everything you've had from Superstar. We're going to have shielding. We're going to have dodge rolls, kind of. We're going to have command grabs on some things. We're going to have like some moves with like 8 different moves built into them. And I think what was really fun is they gave moves that were from Adventure and didn't get the Superstar modern treatment, got them in this game. And I want to shout out Tornado and Needle were really fun in this game. And what do you have to do? Needle has like a upwards needle and I think a downwards needle too, which Spark also got. Spark and Plasma just popped off once they got put together and modernized. Tornado, you can shoot like upwards tornadoes. Needle's got like a dash attack. The Needle dash attack is so cool. And these two do similar things in Forgotten Land. Like Needle moving forward is so fun. Maybe it's like Spark moving forward. And that's something that Squeak Squad taught us. accidentally, probably. But, there's some great new abilities with Return to Dreamland with like Whip, Water, Leaf. They're great, and they've been pretty constant mainstays. But instead of getting caught in the mog of these honestly really similar 4 games, I'll just kind of touch on each one. These two don't have as much that's noteworthy compared to the final ones, but we got plenty to talk about. Triple Deluxe is really similar to Return to Dreamland. And what I think is worth talking about here is not just that the abilities are fun as heck to use, but they started to make really specific ones. Like this beetle one, I think is very specific to Japanese culture and might just kind of look like, oh, it's a beetle helmet if you're not familiar with the concept of this helmet. But so fun and so weird. Circus is so fun and so weird. And this is where we get to the point where I do not know how to use Circus. I don't know how to use Bell. I definitely don't know how to use ESP from Planet Robobot. These abilities get so weird and creative, and I think that's amazing. It's just, when you've got the core stuff going so well, you have room to really dig deep. And at this point, it was like, anybody wanna Bell themed ability? It's fun seeing people's favorite moveset lists now because you can just like say so much about yourself with how hyper specific these are. Like you'll see a kid who's like, oh, I love like Magician, Bell, Bug, and Needle. And I'm like, that is like so like no one else in the world has that same set of 4 abilities. Those are so specific. I say my favorites and they're like Bomb, Ice, and Beam. Like, what does that say about me? Just that I like Kirby. They're so generic. These ones are so specific, and I think that's a really cool part of these new moves. They're so specific. So now, here we go. I think I did a really good job making these two look exciting together here because they're really not that exciting. But Planet Robobot is beloved, and I can't say that I disagree with the hot takes on either of these games. I adore Planet Robobot. It is so good. And yeah, it brought in some really weird abilities as I've been talking about with Doctor, which like I'm still trying to learn how to use Doctor. Poison is pretty much just water, but I love it. It's probably my weirdest favorite. I might call it my 4th favorite. Just the aesthetic is so cool. I like it a lot. So yeah, the abilities continue to be fun. But Planet Robobot and Star Allies do what I kind of hinted at with like kind of weird returns to the mix style or like nods to it to keep things fresh. And Planet Robobot probably has the most meaningful change since, frankly, the mix games, because this robot, I would say, is honestly the closest thing to actually feeling like one of the Dark Matter trilogy mix games, because it kind of feels like an animal friend. You get into this robot, and the gameplay changes, which is just fun on its own from a flavor level, but you're doing these big punches now. Kirby feels very different. And if you get a copy ability, which you can do, they're not the craziest ones. It's like sword, fire, beam, bomb. They're very, very ice. They're very, very, very simple, but they totally change how they work. Like it feels like a mix ability in the sense that it's not just like a bigger version of the normal one or something. Like they're really different. Maybe fire is not that different, but that defeats my point. That totally defeats my point. Like beam goes from being this offensive thing to a kind of defensively bounces balls of light in front of you, which feels so different. And sword is normally a slashing move, and yeah, it's still a slashing move, but just the way that it goes through is so different. And my absolute favorite one is that you can copy Mike, but Mike isn't a single-use gimmicky room clearing move. It's a full moveset, and you can shoot sound waves, which is so cool. It's like one of my favorite things. That's so cool. And I hope it comes back as like an actual moveset someday because they really had the reign to just take these super, super classic abilities and totally reimagine them, which is so Dark Matter trilogy. And I think it is one of the only ways that I feel like in a fundamental way, they've actually called back to those games versus simple ways. Star Allies gets really hated on. And I can't really say that I think it's overhating. We'll get to that point probably. It's not irredeemable. But yeah, if we're looking at it from a copy ability standpoint, it really, really wanted to have a gimmick. Boy, it really wanted to have a gimmick. And I'll be honest, like, it got one. What it has is pretty much the Squeak Squad Fire Sword Firebomb sent up to 11. Like, it's you got to give credit where credit's due. They created unique changes like that for Hammer, Whip, Yo-Yo's back, Sword, Cutter, Ninja. ninjas capable of becoming ice ninja. That's pretty wild. Man, I might be forgetting one, but that's a pretty good set right there. Like those are already super fun abilities to use, and you can give them 4, 5 different elemental types, and they really change stuff. Like your cutters are now going upwards because you used wind on them. They're People say that the level design's not good. I think I agree. It really could have been executed better. But in terms of like flavor, look at this ice hammer. It's a popsicle hammer, and it probably shoots ice out when you hit the ground and stuff. And like electric kunai throws out of the ninja when you have spark ninja. That is so cool. Like a lot of Star Allies gimmicks don't really fundamentally change the gameplay, but boy, are they cool. Like they're just neat. So I like to throw that out there. And yeah, the new ability stayed super weird with Spider. Who's asking for Spider? I don't know, but if Spider is your favorite ability, I salute you because that's super stylish and cool. So here we come to it. The times have changed. We're in 3D now, and I am watching 3D like a parent watching over their child, really scrutinizing their first partner or something. Because I've been raising 2D Kirby my whole life, and now they're moving on to a new part of their life, and just don't have as much control as I did before. And I just hope 3D is good to them. God, Forgotten Land is so much fun. I can't really rank it, but it is top tier favorite Kirby. Completely different gameplay wise from this entire history that I painstakingly laid out for you, but it's still fun. It captures that fundamental fun of copy abilities. And the only question is, what's going on? You know, I think there might be some stuff that I don't know because it's a new game, but there's no dash attacks. So things are a lot, they're really scaled back from modern in terms of the amount of moves. I was shocked. I was so shocked at how easy it was because before we knew that 3D Kirby was happening, it was hard to imagine bombs in 3D. And then they showed us that trailer with all the copy abilities. And I was like, oh my God, it's just bomb in 3D. Hammer. It's just hammer in 3D. Tornado. Everything transitioned fine. Like most of the moves are here, but not all of them. And there's unused trigger buttons where multiple trigger buttons do the dodging and the shielding. So it's like, are we going to end up using those to expand the move sets? Or realistically, are we going to move to combos? Because the only move that has like a deep move set, I'm pretty sure is sword, which I think it's even crazier the more you play and upgrade it. Like you've got that basic combo to start where you do your like dash attack. No, you do your dot, your shield attack, which used to be the crouch attack. But then you keep pressing and you go up and then you go down. So that's a full like string of moves, and it really adds something to sword because sword, even in the most simplistic of games, can't keep from being a little bit more special than everybody else. Even in the adventure style, even in this, where everything is really stripped down to like a ground move and an air move and maybe a charge move in most cases. I will not slander the good name of Kirby and the Forgotten Land here, though. They are so fun, and I am so thrilled to see people enjoying them because they nailed it. And they got creative as heck. Needle, my girl is looking amazing. Like, oh, the like aerial directional needle stuff, that's so fun. Rolling and rolling and rolling and picking stuff up. They really saw that move that hadn't been used since Return to Dreamland. And they were like, we're going to keep investing in you. You are going to keep surviving these generational changes just a little bit. No. That's an understatement. It's one of the most fun moves in the game. And it's so cool. I love how pretty the upgrades are too. Oh, and one of the upgrades is Clutter Needle, the mix ability from the first slide. Like, they love to throw it back superficially. They love to throw it back in like reference to the Dark Matter trilogy. But yeah, I'm really not as well versed in 3D games as I am 2D. So I kind of just have to watch and enjoy whatever happens. All I'm going to say is like, when I look at the sword combos, it makes me say maybe instead of using movement, like jumping, dashing to do inputs from now on, maybe we'll go to like heavy and light attack combos and, combos instead of just directional inputs or movement inputs. You have to really change stuff because when I think about the modern moves that aren't here, I don't know how you just map them. I don't know. Like, I feel like you'd have to really reinvent stuff, but I know they will. It's a very, very, very simplistic. Like I was shocked when I saw how few abilities made into this game. I was legitimately expecting, really just like fundamentally expecting like 6 like 8 more abilities, just because there are some abilities that got cut from this that have probably never missed a game since Adventure. So my fun prediction for the future is I might not know how the moves are going to work, but by God, I can tell you what moves Hal is trying to get back in here, because this roster is pretty much all classic Adventure abilities, like ones that are always there and have always been there, and very few deviations from that. So I think it's really safe to say Parasol and Beam are coming back as fast as they godly can. If they do DLC, I think 4 abilities would be a good way to really freshen up the game and put like a decent amount of work into it. And I think you have to have 2 abilities that are just like glaringly missing from this game. Again, I don't think Parasol and Beam even missed any Dreamland games. Like, it's weird. It's weird not having them here, and I'm thrilled to see them come back. I know they're going to be back and they're going to be good. Wheel, you kind of have to build levels around, but it might be fun to mix it up in like a Breath of the Wild Master Cycle DLC way and just change up how you do levels. I don't know if they would do it, but Wheel is missing. We miss Wheel. Wheel is iconic. It's at least hype enough to do a DLC around. And I think Cupid's coming back because it has not been back since the Flagship games. And they love bringing back old abilities that you've forgotten about. Like they love doing that. It's one of the last ones that hasn't had a callback. And just think about it. You could stay floating at your usual floating height, but do shooting like Hunter. I think that'd be really popular. I think that would be like easy enough to stick into the game as it is, but really different, really a fun different way to do it. So I'd love to see that coming back soon in the next game. Probably we will not be missing these. First off, Spark and Plasma, they've had a bit of a weird history where sometimes they take on each other's traits and sometimes they replace each other. Like I'm pretty sure Spark did the Plasma job in Return to Dreamland and many of the other modern games, but then it just became Plasma and Spark wasn't even in Star Allies. So, they bounce around, but one of them's going to be back. Like Spark wasn't in Superstar. There's a lot of Superstar in Star Allies, actually. That's cool. We're going to get one of them back. Not as soon as Beam, but they are so classic. Rock is coming back. Rock is so classic, and it just hit its stride, being more than a puzzle solution or a cowardly way of beating the bosses. In the modern games, they gave it a pretty fun moveset. Like it was finally breaking out of its shell, and now it's gone. I was so shocked when I saw Rock was gone. I think you have to build levels around Stone even more than you do Wheel, which is weird. It's not level, it's more puzzles. You have to build puzzles around Stone. So I don't think it'll be a DLC, but it's coming back. It has to come back. I miss it. Similarly, Fighter. That is the mystery of the century right now. Fighter is classic. Even when we called it back to the adventure games, Fighter and Bomb remain from Superstar. They are so classic and so fun. Want to know what's weird about Fighter? Is there's a series of moves that I haven't even talked about that I always just slept on. The throwing moves. There were 2 different throws in Adventure, which I think is so funny because I didn't even think about one of the throws. And then one day I realized, hey, these are different. They're called like suplex and backdrop or something like that. And they've been there. They're always one of the kind of weirder abilities, but they nailed it. I forget what it's called. Maybe it's probably called suplex in Star Allies, but they made one that's sort of a combination and it has its own moves like Fighter. It's got a nice dive kick and this just generally a lot of cool stuff. It was really genuinely fun to use alongside Fighter. And then they made Wrestler in Kirby Fighters 2, which has a really fun design and a ton of amazingly fun moves that is way more fun than the former 2. I only play Kirby Fighter 2 to just spend a little quality time with Wrestler. So I almost thought it would come back in the next game that came out, but it hasn't. So if they replace these 2 with Wrestler, because that like fits 3D better or something, power to her. Like Wrestler's really fun. Fighter's classic. Throw is technically classic, but nobody remembers it. But Wrestler's kind of sick. One way or another, this trio is going to come back because they're so fun. There's nothing quite like them. Aside from that, with more situational moves, or I'd prefer maybe Mike becomes a normal ability based on sound wave attacks. UFO is a beloved weird guy, and he might even come instead of Cupid if we get DLC. Function the same way. You float above the ground and you shoot lasers. It might be easier in Forgotten Land than aerial aiming. Either way, UFO is so fun and it has to come back. And Mike is so classic. I'm shocked they didn't put Mike in instead of Crash because those explosions lag the game really badly. But if you didn't animate the explosion, I wonder if sound waves just without much besides like a rippling effect would be easier to run. They do the same thing. So thank you for coming. We're now at the present and the future, and I don't know anything about future copy abilities. We don't have them yet. I hope you learned something besides the fact that I like aerial ice attacks. And most of all, I hope this made copy abilities so like something you can think about more and appreciate more. I hope I kind of got you fired up about what are my favorite copy abilities and what do they say about my playstyle, or what ones do I like the most because of the flavor and the cute hats and stuff, and what are my favorite games. And oh man, I want to try Kirby 64, but I'm gonna pirate it instead. anyhow one last thing. This is going to be uploaded to my YouTube channel, which you already know if you're watching this. And thanks for coming out. Don't have an audience here, so thank you, whoever's watching.